Okay, so have you ever looked at a cannabis bud and thought, that's kind of pointy or maybe a little stretched out, not the usual, nice round shape?
Yeah, it definitely stands out, doesn't it? A bit different from what you typically expect to see.
Well, today on the deep dive, we're actually going to dig into exactly that, this curious growth pattern called foxtailing in cannabis.
Right. Yeah. It's a really interesting topic, and it's quite a bit to unpack there.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to give you the full picture on foxtails. Like, what are they? What causes them? Is it good? Is it bad? And what does it all mean for, for you?
hmm And we've got some great material to work with, right? Some stuff
Mm.
from grower forums, some cultivation articles.
Yeah, you shared some really good stuff, fascinating discussions, some in-depth articles. So yeah, let's get started. Okay,
Yeah.
so first off, visually, what exactly is foxtailing? What does it look like?
Okay, so picture this. Instead of those like dense round nuggets you usually see, the buds start forming these longer, more slender shapes, almost like, well, like a fox's tail. That's where the name comes from.
Ah, okay. So less like a ball and more like a little spire or something.
Exactly, yeah. A tower is a good way to put it. And if you look really close, you see it's made up of the individual calyxes.
Calyces, right. Those are the little pod things, the base of the flower.
That's them. They're like the building blocks.
Yeah.
And in foxtailing, they stack up, one on top of the other, instead of clustering together.
Huh.
Our sources describe them as tower-like structures. Yeah.
Mm,
And that stacking gives it that kind of bushy look they mentioned.
gotcha. And calyces, just to be clear, those are the parts that could hold seeds if the plant got pollinated.
Spot on. They're the core part of the flower. And yeah, it's how they stack up that makes the foxtail shape.
Interesting. And it looks like this whole thing kicked off in one of the forums when a user, Rye, noticed this on their plants. Blueberry cross Big Devil about 10 weeks into flower.
Yeah, that sounds about right for timing. Late flower is often when you really start noticing that kind of structural change if it's going to happen. So Rye's observation makes sense.
Okay, but here's where it gets, like, really interesting. It seems foxtailing isn't always a problem. Like, it's not automatically bad news.
That's a super important point.
Yeah.
Sometimes foxtailing is just genetic. It's just how that particular strain grows.
Genetic. So some plants are just, like, programmed to do that.
Exactly. Like, you know how some tomato varieties are round and some are plum-shaped? Same kind of idea. Certain cannabis genetics just naturally produce these longer buds.
Wow.
And sometimes breeders actually select for that trait. They want that unique look. Some growers find it really appealing.
It's wild. So it's like plant architecture styles or something?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And the sources actually gave some examples.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some purple strains, a strain called Coltrane. They mentioned it's more common in sativas too, especially landraces from places like Colombia or Thailand.
Tropical sativas. Yeah, I can picture those sort of longer, airier buds.
Right. And there's even a theory maybe that shape helps with airflow in humid places,
Yeah.
prevents mold better than dense buds.
Oh, interesting thought. Makes sense.
Yeah. And let's see, blue cheese from Royal Queen Seeds was mentioned, though it's not guaranteed. Trainwreck from Greenhouse Seeds, some types of it.
Okay.
And probably the most famous one is Dr. Grinspoon from Barney's Farm. That's a pure sativa where basically all the buds foxtail like crazy. It's its signature look.
Dr. Grinspoon. I think I've seen pictures. Very distinctive.
Totally.
So if you're growing one of those strains and you see foxtails, it's probably just normal for that plant.
Generally, yeah. When it's genetic, it's mostly just cosmetic. It usually doesn't mess with the potency or the overall yield much. The buds just look different, you know?
Okay, cool. So that's the good kind, or maybe the neutral kind of foxtailing.
Right.
But there's another side to it, the kind that is a sign something's wrong.
Exactly. And that's usually down to environmental stress. That's the key trigger for the bad kind of foxtailing.
Stress. Okay, like what kind of stress?
Well, the big ones mentioned in the sources are heat and light. Too
Yeah.
much of either.
Heat stress. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We always hear about keeping temps right. What are the ideal ranges, roughly?
So the info we looked at breaks it down. Seedlings, you want to kind of cool, like 20, 25 Celsius.
Yeah, okay.
Vegetative stage, they can handle a bit warmer, maybe 22, 28 C.
Right.
Then for flowering, you generally want to bring it down slightly again, maybe 20, 26 C is the sweet spot.
Need 20 to 26 C in flower. Got it. So what happens if it gets much hotter than that?
Well, if you're consistently getting up over, say, 30, maybe 32 Celsius during flowering, That's prime territory for heat stress kicking in and potentially causing foxtails.
Yikes.
And it's not just foxtails. The articles mentioned excessive heat can also cause light bleaching, where the buds lose color, go pale white or yellowish.
Oh, well,
Yeah, like they're sun-bleached. You might even see leaves looking sort of cooked and brittle. Not good.
definitely want to avoid cooked leaves. Okay, what about light stress? How does that cause foxtailing?
So light stress is basically your grow lights being too close to the buds, especially the really intense ones like HPS, LEC, CMH, even some strong LEDs.
Too close, too intense, like a plant sunburn.
Pretty much, yeah. The plant tissue right near the light just gets overwhelmed.
And how does the plant show that, besides foxtailing?
Well, you might see the top leaves and the buds closest to the light actually bleaching white or yellow.
Bleaching again?
Okay.
Yeah.
And it looks different from, say, nitrogen deficiency yellowing. The leaves often stay kind of firm. They don't really wilt in the same way.
Ah, okay. Good distinction.
And yeah, if that light stress is bad enough, it can definitely trigger those stress foxtails, often just on the parts of the plant getting blasted by the light.
So it's localized. That seems like a key difference from the genetic kind that's all over.
Exactly. That localization is a big clue.
Were there other stressors mentioned? Besides heat and light.
Yeah, a few others popped up. Things like pH problems in the soil or growing medium.
Right, nutrient lockout stuff.
Exactly. Keeping it in that 6.0 to 7.0 range in soil is key. Also, unhealthy roots, bad microbes like parasitic nematodes were mentioned.
Ugh, root problems.
Yeah. And
Wow.
interestingly, for some sativas grown indoors, they mentioned even things like too much nitrogen late in flower or maybe keeping them too wet could potentially contribute.
Wow, even nitrogen or water for sativas?
Seems like some strains might be more sensitive to specific things. It's like the plant under stress is kind of desperately trying to throw out more flower sites, even if they aren't developing properly.
So basically, keep the environment stable and happy to avoid the stress kind.
That's the core idea. And remember, this stress-induced foxtailing isn't just looks. It can actually mean the plant is suffering. And especially with heat stress, you might even lose some potency because those high temps can degrade the cannabinoids and terpenes.
Okay, that's crucial. It's not just weird looking, it could be weaker.
Potentially, yeah.
So, for a grower looking at their plant, how do they tell the difference? Good genetic foxtails versus bad stress foxtails. What are the signs?
Okay, yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
The main things to look for are the pattern of the foxtailing
Mm,
and whether you see other stress signs.
pattern and other signs. Okay.
So genetic foxtailing, like we said, tends to be pretty uniform, consistent. You'll see that same stretched out structure on most, maybe all, of the buds across the whole plant.
Like that Dr. Grinspoon example, where it's everywhere.
Exactly like that. Whereas stress-induced foxtailing is often patchy. It might just be on the main colas right under the light, or maybe in one corner of the tent that gets hotter.
Ah, okay. Localized.
Yeah. And then you look for those other clues we talked about. Is there light bleaching on those same buds? Are the leaf tips nearby looking burnt or crispy?
Gotcha.
If you see foxtails plus those other signs of stress, that's a pretty strong indicator it's the bad kind, and you need to figure out what environmental issue is causing it.
Right. Uniform, probably genetic. Localized plus other stress signs equal probably environmental.
Mm.
Makes sense. So if a grower spots that bad stress-induced kind, what can they do? Can they fix it?
Well, the main goal is to reduce whatever stress is causing it, and the sources had some practical tips.
Okay.
If you suspect light stress, the first thing is obvious. Move the light further away from the canopy. Back it off.
Give them some space.
Yeah. That 9.8 inches guideline was mentioned, but honestly, you have to judge based on your specific light and the heat it puts out. If you see bleeding, move it further up.
Makes sense. What about heat?
Airflow, super important, especially in tents or greenhouses. Get some fans moving air around, break up hot spots near the top.
Good airflow, always key.
And keep checking that pH, make sure it's stable in that good range to avoid nutrient lockout, adding another stress.
Right.
Thinking about root health too, maybe using beneficial microbes could help the plant be more resilient. And just generally trying to avoid big temperature swings. Stability is good.
So really it comes back to solid growing fundamentals.
Pretty much, yeah. Stable, optimal conditions.
Mm-hmm.
There was also some specific advice for sativas indoors,
Oh, yeah.
like maybe using a different light spectrum in flower MH or blue heavy LEDs instead of HPS. Being careful with nitrogen, maybe keeping it lower in flower, and even letting the soil dry out a bit more between waterings for some sativas.
Interesting. Fine-tuning for the strain type.
Seems like it can help sometimes. But one thing to keep in mind, Once foxtailing has already happened, especially late in flower, you might not be able to totally reverse that specific growth.
Ah,
You can fix the problem so it doesn't get worse or affect new growths,
yeah,
but the existing foxtails will probably stay looking like foxtails.
got it. So manage the stress, but don't expect miracles on the already foxtailed parts late in the game.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about harvest time? If you've got foxtailed buds, does that change anything? Are they still okay to use? When do you chop?
Yeah, good question. So the sources say foxtail buds are definitely still safe to use. They still have cannabinoids. They still have terpenes.
Okay, that's good news.
But they might feel a bit less dense, maybe a bit airier. And because of that, they might weigh a little less than a really compact round bud.
Less dense, lighter weight makes sense. But how do you know when they're ready?
You still judge it the same way by looking at the trichomes.
Trichomes, clear, cloudy, amber, the usual.
Yep, the usual indicators. You're watching for that shift from clear to mostly cloudy. The tricky part with foxtails, though, is that because new calyxes keep forming on top,
Uh-oh.
they can kind of hide the older, more mature trichomes underneath.
Ah, so you might be looking at new growth that's not ready yet while the stuff underneath is.
Exactly. So you really need to make sure you're checking the trichomes on the foxtails themselves, not just at the base of the bud, to get an accurate picture of ripeness.
Good tip. Look at the triches on the actual foxtail structure, too.
Definitely. Now, here's a weird little tangent that came up in the forum stuff. The word foxtails means something totally different, kind of dangerous for pet owners. Yes. That was a really interesting and actually important aside. Apparently, foxtails is also the name for those sharp, spiky seed heads from certain kinds of grass or weeds.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Those things that get stuck in your socks, or worse, in your dog's fur.
Exactly those. And there's seriously bad news for dogs. They have these little barbs, so they only travel one way inwards.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they can burrow right into the skin, get in ears, noses, paws, and cause nasty infections or worse because they just keep migrating deeper.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely something crucial for any dog owners listening. Watch out for those kinds of foxtails when you're out walking, especially in grassy fields.
Absolutely. A really good safety reminder and a reminder that words can have totally different meanings.
For sure. Okay, back to the cannabis foxtails. The forum had some other really cool insights and analogies, didn't it?
It really did. Some creative thinking going on there. One user made a neat comparison to, like, wheat or grass flowers, which are also sometimes called foxtails, and how they're shaped to catch onto animals to spread seeds.
Huh. Made them wonder about the evolutionary purpose for the cannabis shape, too.
Yeah, it gets you thinking. And then another user, Camover3, had this really interesting analogy. They wondered if foxtails were like seed pods, just forming over and over without seeds.
Right, right.
And they compared it to packing a wound with gauze to irritate it and make it heal. Like the plant is just constantly trying to grow in response to something.
That's a very visual way to put it, like this ongoing, maybe slightly frantic growth. Not scientific, maybe, but it captures the feeling.
It does, yeah. Captures that unusual, continuous growth pattern.
And the difficulty of judging ripeness came up again, too, right? Someone mentioned how the new calyxes hide the older trichomes.
Yep, reinforcing that point about needing to check the tricks on the foxtails themselves. A real practical challenge.
Definitely. And then there was that idea about late-stage foxtailing maybe being like a last-ditch effort by the plant to get pollinated.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating. Linked to rodelisation or hermaphroditism.
Explain that a bit.
Well, the idea was maybe the plant senses it's late in flower, hasn't been pollinated, so it throws out these extra, maybe stickier calyxes, the foxtails, hoping to catch any pollen floating by.
A final attempt.
Yeah. And if that doesn't work, the plant might even go, okay, plan B, and develop some male pollen sacs to try and pollinate itself. Self-preservation.
Wow. Plants are amazing. That reproductive drive is strong.
It really is. And then finally, that same user, Calonnog3, gave that perfect real-world example. They had a power outage, caused heat and humidity spikes,
Right.
and boom, right after that stressful event, their plant started foxtailing. A direct link between the environmental stress and the plant's response.
Couldn't ask for a clearer illustration of the stress trigger.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the absolute key things you want people to take away about cannabis foxtailing?
I think the main thing is understanding the two paths.
Yeah.
It's either genetic or it's stress-induced.
Genetics or stress?
Okay. If it's genetic for that strain, it's mostly just how it looks. Probably not a big deal for quality. But if it's stress, usually heat or light, that's a warning sign.
A sign you need to check your grow conditions.
Exactly. The plant is telling you something isn't quite right. You need to figure out what that is and fix it.
So being able to tell the difference, uniform versus localized, looking for other stress signs, that's really the crucial skill here.
Absolutely. That lets you know whether to just accept it as a genetic trait or whether you need to take action to correct an environmental issue. Addressing stress can prevent it getting worse and helps maintain the quality of your harvest.
Right. So for you listening, hopefully you now have a much better handle on what foxtailing is, the different reasons it can happen, and what it means if you see it, whether it's in your own garden or just buds you come across.
Yeah, hopefully this gives you the confidence to know whether it's just an interesting genetic quirk or a signal that some adjustments are needed in the grow environment.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. As cannabis breeding keeps evolving, people are exploring all sorts of traits. Could we see more strains intentionally bred for structures like foxtailing, for that unique look?
That's a really interesting question.
And if that happens, how might it change what we all think of as the perfect or ideal cannabis bud down the line? Something to chew on as the cannabis world keeps changing.